everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. Today, we are going to be diving into the unexpected third part of the Ryan, Poston, and Shaina Hubers case. In part one, I told you all that this case was going to be in two parts, but that was before I discovered that I had typed the script of part two in a smaller font than I usually use for my scripts, and it ended up being much longer than I expected. We still have so much to talk about, and I don't want to waste any more time, so let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN, and then we'll dive right in. Okay, quick sidebar. If you've ever typed something into Google at 2 a.m. that would horrify your FBI agent, this next part is for you. Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN, and I swear it's like the secret weapon for staying invisible online. Whether I'm researching some sketchy forum post for a case or just looking up how many people disappear on cruise ships every year, I like to know that nobody can track what I'm doing, where I'm doing it from, or worse, try to target me because of it. Surfshark lets you change your virtual location with the click of a button. So if you're in New Jersey but want Netflix to think you're in Tokyo, boom, you have Japanese horror marathons unlocked. It works on unlimited devices, so that means every single device that I have, whether it's my phone, it's my tablet, it's my work computer, it's my home computer, it's my laptop, that's all protected by Surfshark VPN. So are all of my children's devices, their phones, their tablets, their video game systems, the PS5s, the Xboxes, all of that. And Surfshark VPN has a 30-day money-back guarantee, and they're the only VPN that's currently covering 100 countries, so you'll always have a server close by no matter where you are. Plus, the Surfshark Alert feature, it notifies you the second your email or passwords end up in a data leak. It's so good because usually you have to wait to even find out that there's been a data leak at a certain company or on a certain website, and then you have to try to figure out if you were involved in that. But with this Surfshark Alert, you know immediately. It's like having your own personal security guard for your identity. The online safety aspect of Surfshark is so important. It is the reason I have Surfshark VPN. It's the reason that my mom has it on all her devices and my kids all use it. That's the reason, so that we can all stay safer online. But Surfshark has so many other benefits. They will help you avoid being price gouged if you're planning travel or getting rental cars. And the world of entertainment that's opened to you, you can access all of these streaming platforms in all of these different countries. So for instance, I love British television. I'm always having to wait for all the great shows over the pond to come to the United States, but now I don't have to. I can just make it look like my device that I'm watching from, and you can use these on smart TVs and things like that. I'm going to make it look like my device is in the UK. That way I have access to all the stuff that they have. It's amazing. So if you're ready to upgrade your online privacy game and open up your entertainment world, all you have to do is go to surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe and use code stephanieharlowe at checkout. You're going to get 4 extra months for free. Again, that's surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe, or just click the link in the description and get 4 extra months for free, and also protect your peace of mind, because not all creeps are in your DMs. Some are just watching your IP. Thank you so much to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. In April of 2015, 23-year-old Shaina Hubers went on trial for the murder of her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. During the trial, which lasted a little over a week, Shaina and her defense team did not deny that she had shot and killed Ryan, but they claimed she had done so out of self-defense because she was the victim of domestic abuse. This did not fly with the jury. They found Shaina guilty of murder after deliberating for just 5 hours, and she was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In January of 2016, Shaina Hubers filed a motion for a retrial, claiming that one of the jurors in her case, juror number 483, was a convicted felon who had failed to disclose that information on his jury questionnaire. So under Kentucky law, convicted felons are not permitted to serve on juries, and so this claim triggered immediate scrutiny. The juror in question, David Craig, had pleaded guilty to flagrant non-payment of child support back in 1992, which is a very low-level felony in Kentucky. And at the time, he was 30 years old, and he owed about $8,250. Ironically, the attorney who had represented David in that case, Deanna Dennison, was also serving as Shaina's appellate counsel. While preparing the appeal, she recognized David's name and realized he had served on the jury that convicted Shaina. At first, it was unclear whether David had knowingly lied on his questionnaire or simply didn't understand that he had a felony record, but soon David came forward and told the media he hadn't known he was considered a convicted felon. He said, quote, "I don't write so good," end quote. So his longtime girlfriend had helped him fill out the yes or no checkbox form. David added that he read at about a 3rd or 4th grade level, and he was just proud to be there serving on the jury. He said, quote, "I was so nervous when I was down there, I thought, no way they were going to pick me. I'm not smart enough. I have a 9th grade education." And everybody there looked like business owners, doctors, teachers, and stuff. Nobody looked like me, end quote. Aw, David. I mean, he sucks because he didn't pay his child support, but aw, that's so sad. Still, David was thrilled to serve, telling the paper, quote, "I think I'm the first one in my family to ever serve on a jury," end quote. David Craig had never served jail time for his offense and had been legally purchasing guns for years and genuinely didn't remember being told that the charge was a felony when it had happened more than 2 decades earlier. Shaina's attorney, Dennison, told reporters, quote, "They say a felon shall not sit on a jury. We can't pick and choose what felons we think we're okay with," end quote. Which I agree. You shouldn't make special conditions or special rules for, one person and not others. It should be the same across the board, but let's not act like that's what you guys really care about here. Shaina and her defense counsel, this was a quick nice little loophole that you could throw out to go ahead and get a new trial, even though, in my opinion, and obviously the jury's, and obviously the judge and many, many other people, Shaina was just as guilty as sin. So I think that this was just convenient. I don't think that David not paying his child support would have affected the way that he viewed the information and the evidence in the trial, but whatever. As we know, this is the legal system, and it is full of gray areas and loopholes. David Craig, meanwhile, was openly distressed at the idea that he might be the reason Shaina Hubers could walk free. He wondered aloud, quote, "Could I be the reason, the technicality that she could get out on? She don't deserve to get out. That's going to be on my shoulders. I wonder, will 20 deputies come here to arrest me? If forgetting is wrong, then lock me up, I guess," end quote. He also offered insight into the deliberations, saying that the jury was unanimous from the beginning on Shaina's guilt. What they took time deciding was her sentence. When asked about Shaina, David said, quote, "She was a mean girl, and her mama was cold. She never even cried once," end quote. After Shaina filed her motion for a new trial, the court had to determine whether this technically warranted a retrial. Ryan's family was obviously adamant that it did not. There was no new evidence, and they felt the original verdict should stand. Public opinion seemed to agree. They felt like David had made a genuine mistake, but that mistake didn't mean Shaina wasn't guilty. In the end, the court determined that David should not have served on Shaina's jury. Like I said, under Kentucky law, a felon is a felon, regardless of intent or awareness, and that meant that Shaina was entitled to a new trial. On August 25, 2016, the Campbell Circuit Court formally granted her request, and the ruling came despite heavy public pressure to let the original verdict stand, and it reopened wounds for Ryan's loved ones who had already endured years of legal proceedings and emotional fallout. Still, they remained measured and resolved. Ryan's father, Jay, made it clear that their family would not be deterred by another trial. He said, quote, "We will jump through as many hoops as we have to jump through to get justice for my son. If we have to do this 100 times, we will do it 100 times. It will all be okay. We believe strongly that the evidence is overwhelming, and we believe justice will still be served," end quote. In a written statement, he echoed that same strength and resolve. Quote, "We as a family and a community have the serenity to accept that which we cannot change. The fact that Shaina Hubers has been granted a retrial for the cold-blooded murder of our beloved Ryan. Our families will not have true serenity, however, until we have been granted justice for Ryan. We are steadfastly resolved to pursue this as long as it takes to accomplish." End quote. Next, Shaina's attorneys filed a motion to move the retrial out of Campbell County, arguing that the extensive media coverage made it impossible for her to receive a fair trial there. And to support their request, they began working on a formal petition for a change of venue, which required signed affidavits from local residents who agreed that Shaina's case had been too widely covered. In June of 2017, Shaina's attorneys submitted their formal change of venue petition, which included 156 signed affidavits. But it didn't take long for prosecutors to realize that something was off. One of the signatures belonged to an assistant Commonwealth's attorney, someone who worked directly with the prosecution and would never have signed that document. And upon closer review, officials determined that 118 of the 156 signatures were forged. Unbelievable. So many of the names were people that the notary who notarized the affidavits, Brittany Young, appeared to know from Facebook. And when she ran out of familiar names, she began pulling names from public property records at random. And she just happened to randomly pull the name of somebody who worked with the prosecution that the prosecution knew for a fact this person would never sign these affidavits or this petition. So when looked into further, dozens of people whose signatures appeared on the petition told authorities they had never seen the affidavit before, let alone signed it. So Brittany Young, she was charged with forgery and ultimately pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to 30 days in jail, 150 days of home detention, and 5 years of probation. After the forgeries were exposed, Shaina's defense team claimed they had no idea what was going on, and they withdrew the original motion and filed a new one. This is still a change of venue motion. Now, am I going to say that there's no way Shaina's defense team didn't know what was going on? I want to say that. That's what I feel in my gut. There's absolutely no way the defense team didn't know what was going on. What motive did Brittany Young have to do that without some sort of coercion or some sort of promise of something from the defense team? Plus, Brittany Young worked as a notary at the investigative firm that Shaina's defense team hired. But either way, the defense team said they had no idea that she was doing this. None. And it's just wild because it's one thing to throw in a few fake petitions, but an overwhelming majority. At this point, Shaina was desperate to have her motion to move the trial out of Campbell County approved, but so far it hadn't worked. There simply wasn't enough pretrial publicity to justify it. And I mean, remember, this trial was not aired publicly. I think the judge allowed like one reporter in the courtroom and one on the outside to report on what was happening inside, but it wasn't like this was a national trial at this point. It wasn't like people all over the world knew about it. So Shaina took matters into her own hands. She reached out to WCPO 9 News and requested a jailhouse interview, saying she wanted to talk about her recent and unexpected engagement to a fellow inmate, Unique Taylor, a transgender woman who had been convicted of drug trafficking. Shaina claimed the two had fallen in love while incarcerated and were planning to get married. So, in my opinion, Shaina's like, oh, hold on. They're saying my trial and my case doesn't have enough publicity. So I'm going to go out there and make publicity so that they can no longer say that, which honestly, she should not have been allowed to give any public interviews knowing that another trial was coming up. And the second she did give a public interview, that's when the judge should have been like, nah, motion dismissed completely, and don't you dare file another one. So the news station, WCPO, the reporter Craig McKee agreed to interview and meet with Shaina at the Campbell County Detention Center. And she opened the conversation by explaining how she met Unique and how their connection had developed behind bars.
I can only describe it as like a spiritual encounter that I had with another person that I met here a couple years ago that I grew to know over the years. Mm-hmm. And we just got really close, and, we're both forced into a similar situation. And Unique and I have a lot in common, and we just grew very close over the years.
Mm-hmm. So when you first met Unique obviously was arrested. Richard McBee goes by Unique, yes. Obviously. January 10th of 2016. So when did you, after that?
I met McBee that summer of 2016 when I returned for my new trial.
Okay.
Yeah. So. I left Campbell County Jail and was transferred south of here in January of 2016, right after he arrived. So I didn't meet Unique, she until that summer. Right. To me, I don't see Unique as a gender. I don't see Unique as a man or a woman. I see Unique as a soul that I love. So if I slip up in my wording, it's because to me, this is a person that I love. It's not about this person's gender.
I think it can be easy to slip
Although
up.
And it is, and it's difficult for others to understand.
Sure.
So.
Shaina went on at length about Unique, but oddly, she referred to Unique almost exclusively as Richard and used he/him pronouns throughout the interview. It was jarring, at times even surreal. Reporter Craig McKee repeatedly tried to steer the conversation towards her upcoming retrial, her lack of apology to the Poston family, or the facts of the case itself, but Shaina wouldn't budge. She insisted the interview focus solely on Unique and claimed that all the media coverage surrounding her had made it impossible for her to get a fair trial. The entire exchange felt less like a heartfelt conversation and more like a calculated publicity stunt. And then, shortly after the interview aired, Shaina and Unique were married in a brief jailhouse ceremony. Despite all the media attention Shaina's marriage had garnered, it still wasn't enough to convince the court to move her trial to a different county. And in August of 2018, her retrial began. Jury selection took several days due to how well-known the case was, and in the end, they seated a jury of 11 women and 3 men who said they could put aside any prior knowledge they had of the case and give Shaina a fair trial. And the second trial closely mirrored the first. It lasted 16 days, and most of the evidence and arguments stayed the same. There was a new judge and defense team, but the prosecution was again led by our girl Michelle Snodgrass. And in opening statements, Snodgrass told the jury that Shaina had intended to kill Ryan on October 12, 2012. She acknowledged that Ryan wasn't a perfect person. He wasn't the best boyfriend in the world, but emphasized that he was not abusive. The defense, now headed by David Eldridge, argued that Shaina acted in self-defense, describing the relationship as toxic and emotionally abusive. They didn't just rely on self-defense, though. They also leaned heavily on the claim that Shaina had been under extreme emotional disturbance brought on by Ryan's alleged abuse. Her attorney pointed to the fact that just the night before the shooting, Ryan had invited her to his parents' home, something that Shaina took as a sign that he wanted to reconcile, which, by the way, is bullshit because Ryan's mother already said that before Shaina left that night, Shaina was like, hey, this is probably it. Like, I probably won't see you again. So Shaina saying that she thought that Ryan inviting her to his parents' house was a sign he wanted to reconcile is contradictory to her telling his mom, hey, this is goodbye, I probably won't see you again. But there were also 2 new witnesses in this trial, one for the prosecution and one for the defense. The prosecution witness was a mall employee who had interacted with Shaina and her mother on October 12th when they came in to shop. Remember, Shaina had spent the night at Ryan's townhouse. He'd broken up with her, and then he locked himself in his bedroom, and then she called her mother hysterical. Her mother drove over there, spent the night with her at Ryan's townhouse, even though Shaina Hubers apparently thought that the townhouse was messy and disgusting. And then when they got up, Shaina and Sharon went shopping. The clerk testified that Shaina was visibly upset and said she was going to kill Ryan. And although they didn't report it at the time, the clerk recalled Shaina being in a fit of rage about Ryan going on a date with another woman. The new defense witness was Shaina herself. She took the stand and spoke at length about the emotional and sexual dynamics of the relationship with Ryan. All of this was to reinforce her attorney's tactic to lean into the emotional distress she'd been under leading up to and at the time of the shooting. Shaina testified that she had felt uneasy around Ryan from the very beginning, starting with their first in-person meeting when they went bar hopping for her birthday. According to Shaina, Ryan used a strong grip to pull her around and grabbed her bare thigh without her consent. She said she was so uncomfortable that she eventually called a cab from the bathroom to leave. Shaina said that when she and Ryan eventually did start dating, they would often have rough sex when they were drunk. She said she regularly went along with sex acts that made her uncomfortable. When discussing their sex life in more detail, Shaina focused heavily on her inability to orgasm, which the media dubbed her orgasm defense. She claimed Ryan believed it stemmed from her history of childhood sexual abuse, and he pressured her to talk about it, often in ways she described as callous. At one point, Ryan had even texted her suggesting that breast augmentation surgery might help her reach orgasm, a message the defense pointed to as further evidence of emotional harm. And to be clear, this so-called orgasm defense is widely viewed as legally tenuous, meaning it was not only weak, but also not strongly supported by established law or precedent. It is very likely that this defense was an attempt to frame the emotional context of the crime, and I personally feel that Shaina and her defense team were trying to slip in a narrative that a previous jury had already rejected when they were told during the first trial that Ryan Poston was an abusive monster, and they found Shaina guilty. And they found that Shaina had not killed Ryan out of self-defense because the defense had no concrete, corroborated evidence of physical abuse. So they reframed it into something fuzzier, less concrete, harder to disprove. Ryan had degraded Shaina emotionally and sexually. His criticisms had caused extreme emotional disturbance in Shaina, and she eventually snapped.
There were continued issues throughout the relationship about the issue of orgasm.
And how did you respond to that?
I tried to please Ryan to the best of my ability.
How so?
He wanted to try different things, and he ordered different things off the internet to help me achieve orgasm.
Was there any other thing that Mr. Poston encouraged you to do in relation to your ability to orgasm?
Yes, sir.
And what was that?
He wanted me to obtain a G-shot injection inside of my vagina, and I'm sure nobody knows what that is. I didn't know what it was. It's a collagen injection inside of your G-shot, inside of your body.
In my opinion, this defense tactic was to try and create a gray area where they could paint Ryan in a negative light without needing the kind of tangible proof jurors expect for domestic abuse claims. Shaina testified that Ryan didn't want to have sex and blamed it on his antidepressants. She said, quote, "He also said he didn't want to have sex because I couldn't orgasm. He said he didn't see the point." End quote. She claimed their relationship began to deteriorate in 2012 after she refused to engage in a sex act that she described as degrading. She also described what she viewed as emotionally abusive behavior.
He would pick on me and belittle me and bully me in front of strangers. And it could be for something as small as how I was eating my food. And it would just feel very humiliating and degrading.
Shaina testified about an arrangement she and Ryan allegedly made when they got back together in July of 2012. She said that they had agreed if they had a threesome with another woman, Ryan would post 10 photos of Shaina on Facebook, show her more affection, and improve his communication. Shaina took the deal because she loved Ryan so much and would do anything for him. On the stand, Shaina admitted to displaying possessive and controlling behavior throughout her relationship with Ryan. She said that when Ryan tried to end things, she would flood him with text messages even when he didn't respond. She also admitted admitted to going to his condo uninvited, using the spare key she had, and letting herself in when he wasn't home. She testified that she didn't trust Ryan and routinely searched his phone. She blocked other women on his Facebook account and even contacted his neighbors to see if he was home when she wasn't nearby. She used different phone numbers to text him, including a friend's number, so he wouldn't ignore her messages. On October 1st, just 11 days before she killed him, Shaina posed as a potential client using a friend's phone to contact Ryan at work and then insulted him repeatedly in a series of messages. During one of their many breakups, Shaina told Ryan she had a heart condition, hoping he would feel bad for her. As for the night of October 12th, Shaina now had a brand new story. She testified that she went to Ryan's condo that evening, but when she asked about his day, he seemed irritated, and the two quickly got into an argument. Maybe he's irritated because he broke up with you, and then you showed up at his condo asking how his day was. But according to Shaina, Ryan insulted her appearance, criticized her voice and her family, and called her crazy and unstable. She said his eyes, normally blue, looked completely black. Shaina said that when she tried to go into the bedroom to collect her things and leave, Ryan grabbed her by the bra and waistband and threw her into another room. They then made their way into the dining room, where things turned deadly.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what happened.
When I arrived at the condominium, Ryan was standing at the foot of the dining room table. His eyes were completely black. He was angry. He just grabbed onto me and we started to wrestle. And he fell on top of me onto an area between the sofa and onto the footstool. He had all of his weight on my body and he was jerking my head around with his hand in my hair. I thought that he was going to snap my neck because of the way that he was jerking my head around. He screamed at me, "You're a f***ed up person, and that's why you can't orgasm, and that's why I can't love you, and that's why no one will ever be able to love you." He put his hand on my chest and pushed me back down onto the floor. And I was crying, and I was hysterically crying, and I recall Ryan standing over me and grabbing the gun that was sitting on the table and pointing it at me and saying, "I could just kill you right now and get away with it. Nobody would even know." He set the gun back down on the table and he walked around the table and he was still talking and he was still saying hurtful things. I don't remember exactly what. And I grabbed the gun and I shot him.
Okay, so I know some of you don't like when I talk about Amber Heard because there are people out there who genuinely believe that she in some way is a victim. And maybe so. But also, factually, she lied. She lied about a lot of things. She lied in a courtroom on the stand. And Shaina Hubers, her testimony reminds me of Amber Heard's. Just simply the way she talks, the things she's saying, how all of these new details are suddenly coming out. Shaina never told these details to the police during her interrogation. These details never came out during the first trial. None of these details have ever been heard, but now she has this elaborate series of events. Like they fell on the floor between the couch and the footstool, and he was yanking her hair, yanking her head around by her hair, things like that. Then he went for the gun, and I could shoot you right now and nobody would ever find out. These seem important, right? This series of events seems like it will be important, and that would definitely be something she would have said during her police interview, and it definitely would have come out during the first trial. Not only did none of that happen, she never said this to the police, never came out in her first trial, so I believe that the reason she never told this to the police, the reason it never came out in her first trial, was because she's making this up now. She is making this up for the benefit of the second trial because she has an interest, once again, in this last-ditch effort to gain her innocence, win her freedom. she's trying to just make everything between her and Ryan sound worse than it was. She never talked about this before, okay? And then Shaina told the jury that after shooting Ryan, she searched the condo for her phone, called her mother to tell her what had happened, and then dialed 911. She didn't remember what she said during the call, though. After Shaina finished telling the jury her version of events, prosecutor Michelle Snodgrass began her cross-examination, which was amazing, okay? So Snodgrass asked Shaina how many times she had shot Ryan and where each bullet struck, but Shaina said she couldn't remember. Snodgrass then pressed Shaina on why she fired 5 more times after the initial shot had already incapacitated him.
One was that when I first shot him, he let out a really loud noise that sounded like an animal. It was a very animalistic noise. It scared me. It freaked me out. I also, when I first shot him, wasn't sure where the shots had entered or if I had just made him more angry and therefore he was more of a threat and it would make the situation even more severe. And then thirdly, I had the mistaken belief that there was another gun on the table.
And you
I know now that there wasn't another gun on the table, but at the time I thought that there was.
He made a really loud noise when you shot him, and it freaked you out, so you shot him again, and you had the mistaken belief that there was another gun on the table. Why would there have been another gun on the table? In her first trial, Shaina and her defense team talked about how the gun was on the dining room table because that is where Ryan put it when he came home. He took the gun off of him and put it on the dining room table. Why would she have thought there was another gun on the table when there was only ever this one gun on the table when Ryan was home at the townhouse and present? Why would she have thought that? She never really does say why she had this mistaken belief that there was another gun on the table, besides the fact that it's convenient to her defense now that there may have been this looming threat, that even though she had shot him and that loud noise he made when she shot him freaked him out, there could have been a still clear and present threat with this phantom gun on the table. Snodgrass also asked Shaina about the shocking things she said in her interrogation, like how she gave Ryan the nose job he always wanted.
I'm not saying that my statements weren't coherent. I'm saying my mindset wasn't completely coherent. But there were some things throughout the course of your statement that were consistent. Okay. And seeing him twitching and being painful for you was one of those things that was consistent and said by you over and over again. I said that. And because you didn't want to watch him die, you shot him more times, in your words, to the point where you knew he was dead. I said those things. Is that similar? To what people do when they see an injured animal?
Objection, sustained.
Withdrawn, Your Honor.
Please
And nothing
disregard
further.
that question.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
So all of this looked really bad for Shaina. Worse, in fact, I think, than everything that went down during her first trial. And this was probably why she did not take the stand in her first trial, because she's not a sympathetic witness. She's not a believable witness. She doesn't have answers for a lot of the things she's asked, besides, I don't know or I don't remember. And she just does seem like she's making it up as she goes along. Like she's coming up with these things in her head as she's testifying, almost as if she hadn't even rehearsed this before. She's saying it all on the stand. Additionally, the defense had brought in another mental health professional, Dr. Thomas Schacht, a forensic psychologist who had spent approximately 37 hours interviewing Shaina and reviewing her personal history from childhood through adulthood. He testified that at the time Shaina shot Ryan Poston in 2012, her psychological condition was seriously impaired and abnormal. Schacht said that Shaina's mental state fit into known classifications, saying, quote, "The best descriptors are borderline personality disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder," end quote. He also said that he believed Shaina's downward mental spiral was related to a sexual assault she had suffered in high school, and after that, things for Shaina changed dramatically. Quote, she started drinking. There was promiscuous sexual activity. There was other reckless behavior. She got arrested for underage alcohol, misdemeanor shoplifting, end quote. Even though he was an expert witness for the defense, Dr. Schacht still upheld his professional conduct and testified that although Shaina's mental state was seriously abnormal, his evaluation did not support a legal insanity defense. For the prosecution, Dr. Dustin Boyd-Wygant, a clinical psychologist who had spent 15 hours evaluating Shaina, he testified, and he agreed that it was also his opinion that Shaina had borderline personality disorder, but he disagreed with Dr. Schacht's diagnosis of CPTSD or PTSD. He told the jury that Shaina knew what she was doing during the 911 call and during her police interview, and she didn't show any signs of dissociation, saying, quote, she was able to recall how she felt during the shooting, and shortly thereafter, she was able to provide some connection to what Mr. Poston might have been feeling, that he was suffering, and that she would end his life because of that, end quote. Let's put a pin in this discussion about Shaina's mental state and mental health. We're going to come back to it, trust me. Additionally, Highland Heights Police Chief Bill Birkenhauer was brought back as a rebuttal witness because during the retrial, Shaina claimed that Ryan had physically picked her up and thrown her around. She even said that he picked her up by her bra and pants and threw her in another room before she shot him. So to test that claim, Birkenhauer, who had led the crime scene investigation, he was asked to examine the bra that Shaina was wearing the night of the murder. And he testified that the bra showed no signs of having been stretched, torn, or having any broken clasp, meaning the physical evidence directly contradicted Shaina's account of being lifted by her bra. This specific bra, there was no sign of that because she's lying, because she's making things up as she goes along. After the state and defense rested, the jury deliberated for just 3.5 hours before returning another guilty verdict. For the second time, Shaina was convicted of murdering Ryan. And next up was the sentencing phase. The prosecution asked for the maximum punishment, while the defense requested, once again, mercy. Shaina's attorney pushed for a 20-year sentence, arguing that she was young, psychologically troubled, and capable of rehabilitation. He called her actions mitigated by her immaturity and psychological disorders. And Shaina's mother, Sharon, took the stand and also begged for mercy for Shaina. She said that her husband, Shaina's father, was mentally ill and Shaina was all she had left. But Michelle Snodgrass, the prosecutor, pushed back hard on claims that Shaina deserved mercy. She reminded the jury of Shaina's own admission that she had fired shots into Ryan, paused, and then fired more. Snodgrass said, quote, an execution, how callous is that? That's how you treat roadkill. End quote. She went on to say, quote, mercy didn't happen when she decided to play God as she lifted that gun again and again and again and again. So why are we showing mercy now? She took a life. The only appropriate decision is life. End quote. In the end, the jury recommended life with the possibility of parole after 20 years. And in December 2018, Shaina had her second sentencing hearing. Again, Ryan's family stood in the courtroom and delivered impact statements asking the judge to sentence Shaina to life in prison. Ryan's sister Katie brought a teddy bear made from one of Ryan's shirts. When she pressed its paw, a recording of Ryan's voicemail played.
That's it. That's all we have. A voicemail.
Ryan's father, Jay, also took the stand.
It's daunting to know that I've got another 30 or 40 years on this earth, God willing. And I'll have another 35 or 40 Christmases without my son. And my grandchildren stolen from me. I will never hold my grandchildren. She has decimated my life and many other lives. Ryan had a heart of gold. His goodness literally got him killed. His kindness got him killed.
Shaina's mother, Sharon, also gave a statement, obviously in support of Shaina.
Ms. Hubers, go ahead.
Shaina,
as I said, is my only child. My child's life has also been taken. Her family also grieves. I'm not lessening or taking away from or trying to say that I don't understand the grief of this family, because I do. Both beautiful young people, both talented.
Ultimately and thankfully, the judge upheld the jury's recommendation of life without parole for 20 years and told Shaina, quote, "Your actions that evening were grossly violent and intentionally calculated to cause his death." End quote. Shaina later appealed the second conviction, claiming issues ranging from juror bias and denial of a venue change to the inclusion and exclusion of key evidence. And while waiting for the appeal to come back, Shaina and her wife, Unique, divorced. So sad. I really was rooting for those two kids. I thought it was going to work. They had so much in common. It's honestly sad to me, though, to think that Shaina married this person who probably had no knowledge of how manipulative and unhinged and out of her mind Shaina was. She married this person for a publicity stunt. She married this person to, once again, just be a means to an end. People are a means to an end to Shaina Hubers. Now, a year later in 2020, the Kentucky Supreme Court denied Shaina's appeal. Good. And they ruled there had been no reversible error. Shaina is currently serving her life sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women. She will be eligible for parole in 2032. To pass the time, she maintains a profile on writeaprisoner.com, where she continues to seek companionship. And it's funny because in part 1, I just posted part 1 today. Part 2 is being edited right now. But in part 1, somebody said, "Oh, hey, like I've been pen pals with Shaina. They write to each other from prison." And I was like, "Please tell me more about this. Please tell me more about what Shaina Hubers is saying to you in these letters." Shaina's Write a Prisoner profile begins, quote, "I am a tall and thin brunette, standing at 5'9" inches tall and 115 pounds, with lots of long, wavy, golden brown hair, big steel blue doe eyes, and a wide, bright smile on a heart-shaped face." End quote. I mean, I'm sorry. It's not like none of that is true. It's true. She does have a heart-shaped face, and she does have steel blue doe eyes and lots of wavy hair, all true things, but it just kind of shows you her penchant for the dramatic, her penchant for the creative. Shaina goes on to describe her background and circumstances, writing, quote, "It has been almost 10 years now that I've been locked away from the free world. I was tried twice on the same court case. I am praying for the best outcome as my case is still under review. I have hope and faith for the future. Kentucky is also an interesting Commonwealth state with ever-changing laws and sentences." End quote. Shaina presents herself as someone who has changed, asking to be judged not by her past, but by the woman she claims to have become. She says, quote, "I've grown much since the 21-year-old girl I was in October 2012. At the time of my arrest, I'm looking for someone who won't judge me by my past, but by the woman I've become. It can be hard to be judged by false conviction theories in the media used to obtain television ratings and a conviction and maximum penalty in court." End quote. These are not false narratives. These are not false things that are used for television ratings and to get a conviction. This is all evidence. Everything that was put forward in your first trial and your second trial, Shaina, is all evidence. Your own words from your police interrogation were used against you. That was damning, okay? These are not fabricated things. Nobody put on a Shaina Hubers suit, sat down in that interrogation room and started saying out-of-pocket wild things. So yeah, Shaina still in denial. And she ends her post, her profile, by saying, quote, "I've been through a heartbreaking journey, but I haven't given up on meeting someone true, loyal, loving, respectful, non-judgmental, and devoted. Waiting to hear from you, Shaina." End quote. Remember when she was in her police interview and she was like, "Man, maybe I'll never get married because who's going to want to date me when they know I killed my boyfriend?" apparently she changed her mind. Apparently she realized or discovered or acknowledged that having a relationship is super important to her. And I feel that that is the case because Shaina's identity is always going to be perpetually wrapped up in the person that she's dating. Okay. So to this day, Shaina's mother, Sharon, still stands firmly behind her daughter. She believes Shaina acted in self-defense and rejects the public perception of her daughter. She says, quote, "She's far from evil. Shaina has a heart of gold. She's like her mommy, a loving spirit," end quote. I mean, okay, first of all, let me get this out of the way. I don't even blame her for believing Shaina because I guarantee you, knowing people like Shaina, that girl was in her mother's ear for months talking about how horrible Ryan was, possibly laying this groundwork for the fact that he was abusive. I do feel, though, once again, that faced with the evidence, at least in your own head, you'd be like, ugh, this is not something that a loving spirit with a heart of gold would do. This just isn't it. You know, you could acknowledge that in your own head. I hope that Sharon has at least come to terms with the fact that although the daughter she knew was a loving spirit with a heart of gold, like her mommy, by the way, which is, ugh, I don't like that she said that. I don't like she said like her mommy. She's a loving spirit like her mommy. Yeah, I don't like that. But if you can't publicly acknowledge that what Shaina did was wrong, I hope at least internally, you know, Sharon has come to terms with that, because continuing to kind of defend this and act as if Shaina had no part in this and no blame whatsoever, that's not going to help Shaina. That's not going to help Shaina. And unfortunately, I think that's the way that Shaina was raised, which is one of the major reasons of why she is the way she is, why she doesn't take any accountability, and why she tries to point the finger and blame everyone else. Even it's like, I shot this person multiple times and killed them. It wasn't my fault, though. It was his fault. It was the fact that he owned guns. It was the fact that he was so mean to me and would talk about me and make me feel less than about myself. I want to really be clear here that I know very well there are people, men and women, who treat their partners like Shaina is claiming Ryan treated her. But it is also my opinion that when you're in this kind of, trauma bonded, toxic dynamic as the victim, you're really not thinking, I want to kill this person, because there's a part of you that still loves them or thinks you love them or thinks that the codependency you've developed with them is love. So there's a part of you that really believes that you still love them. And there's also a part of you that's wondering, like, is this my fault somehow? Like, did I contribute to this in some way? Because Shaina's basically saying that Ryan was gaslighting her, making her feel less than, messing with her self-confidence, her self-esteem. And yet in the aftermath of shooting him, there was none of that dissociation, as the psychologist said. There was none of this like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, I did something wrong. He was so good to me. That's how a victim who was in this horrible mental toxic manipulation cycle would behave. They would be wondering, did I do this? What did I do to contribute this? I can't believe I did this. She was very much self-righteous afterwards. Like, yeah, I did it. I did it. I gave him the nose job he always wanted. I mean, yeah, I was going to show me. You're going to call me a redneck? I'll show you what kind of redneck I am. I'll show you what a redneck does. It was more vengeful, vindictive, like I got revenge. That does not come from a place of I've been manipulated and trauma bonded, and this person has put me into such a confused mental state, I don't even know which way is up. That's the cycle that keeps you coming back to them. That is not what makes you take a gun and shoot them multiple times. That's anger, that's hate, that's contempt, that's I'm going to show you. You don't treat me like that. So when we talk about a case like P. Diddy and Cassie didn't want to kill P. Diddy. She wanted to get away from him. And then when she finally did, she didn't even want to think about him again. She didn't want to talk to him. She didn't want to go anywhere near it. She wanted to just like erase it from her brain, erase it from her life. She wasn't going to his house to keep going back for more after she had finally gotten away. And I could also say, yeah, it would make sense if you're in this kind of abusive, manipulative relationship that Shaina was claiming she was in and that Ryan was the catalyst to. then maybe you would keep coming back. You would keep coming back, Some people might say, if you're being abused, why don't you just leave? That it's not always that simple. It's not always that easy. It takes an average of 7 times for a domestic abuse victim to leave. But when he's going on another date, when he's locking himself in his room, when he's not responding to any of your messages and you keep going back for more and that more ends up with him dead, that is not what the victim of domestic abuse does. A domestic abuse victim, once they've reached the point where they're like, oh shit, this person was doing this horrible stuff to me and had me completely, upside down in my head and got in my brain with steel-toed boots and just kicked around in there and destroyed my nervous system, they want to avoid that person at all costs. They just want to go no contact. They don't want to deal with that person. They're not thinking, I'm going to go and kill this person. That's not what happens. In my opinion, that is not what happens. Now, self-defense, if you're in an active situation where somebody's coming at you, where you've gone to their apartment, they're trying to hurt you, they're trying to kill you. Yes, we've seen that happen with victims of domestic abuse. But there is no evidence that Ryan Poston was ever abusive physically to Shaina. And all of the things she said about him lifting her by her bra and throwing her, there was actually physical evidence disproving that. Not to mention the fact that her story changed 100 million times. So there's no way I believe that there was physical abuse happening at the hands of Ryan Poston the night he died. Because if there was, why would Shaina go and search up how to pick a lock with a bobby pin and then do that to Ryan's bedroom that he had locked himself into to get away from her? Just does not add up. So online, a Facebook group called Shaina Hubers Wrongly Charged, Wrongly Sentenced continues to advocate for her. The page shares a mix of photos taken before her incarceration, including a cover photo featuring a bikini pic and more recent images captured in prison, selfies in her prison-approved clothing, bra and underwear modeling shoots, and stylized poses at the computer. But while Shaina poses for photos and writes hopeful letters, Ryan Poston's family continues to grieve an irreplaceable loss. His father, Jay, said, quote, "Since Ryan's birth, I gauged my well-being by his. My plan in life was always I would be with my son. I would be a doting grandfather, and that was my whole focus. My name ends with this. He was my lineage. He was the last of me." End quote. And Jay said there is no such thing as closure when it comes to losing a child, especially not your only one. For the Poston family, there is no moving on, only surviving a future that Ryan was supposed to be a part of. So let's talk about this and try to make some sense of it. When it was claimed during the first trial that Shaina was diagnosed as bipolar, I raised an eyebrow. I know people who have bipolar disorder, and I also know people who have borderline personality disorder. And in my opinion, Shaina's actions and behaviors align far more with BPD than bipolar. Now, don't get upset here, okay? Don't get upset, please. Because this is not aimed at anyone other than Shaina Hubers. So I just want you to hear me out. If you suffer from bipolar, if you suffer from BPD, I am so sorry. I sympathize and empathize with your struggle. I wish you the best. I do not think you're a bad person. There are many more factors to why Shaina did what she did outside of her BPD diagnosis. So let's talk about BPD and bipolar. One of the biggest defining characteristics of bipolar disorder is episodic mood shifts, periods of mania and depression that can each last for up to days or weeks, sometimes with symptom-free intervals in between. From what we learned about Shaina Hubers, her emotional instability appeared to be chronic and situational. Her intense reactions were consistently tied to relationship triggers with Ryan and not standalone mood episodes which were independent of external events. So now, with that being said, let's look at the hallmark traits of BPD, borderline personality disorder, and how Shaina's behavior and actions track with this personality disorder, which is marked by extreme instability in emotions, relationships, and self-image. People with BPD often experience intense emotional reactions. They struggle to manage those emotions and those reactions, and they may act impulsively, especially in situations that trigger fears of rejection or abandonment. And these intense feelings can shift rapidly and are usually tied to interpersonal stress, making their relationships very turbulent and highly charged. Fear of abandonment is a core feature of BPD, and for someone with this disorder, the threat of losing a relationship can trigger overwhelming panic, like survival itself is dependent on keeping that person close. Shaina repeatedly ignored Ryan's boundaries. She showed up uninvited, refused to leave, called and messaged him excessively. She would even sometimes steal Ryan's cousin's phone so she could attempt to contact him that way, because remember, Shaina and Ryan's cousin, they were friends. Even months after the official breakup, Shaina lingered in Ryan's life, literally planting herself in his condo like an uninvited ghost. And Ryan's upcoming date with Audrey Bolte seemed to definitely have activated a desperate, do whatever it takes mindset in Shaina, because she was terrified that if Ryan actually moved on, if he actually found someone else, she would lose him forever. People with BPD experience relationship instability. In the DSM-5, symptoms of BPD include intense, unstable, and conflicted personal relationships, and research has confirmed that people with BPD tend to have very stormy romantic relationships characterized by a great deal of turmoil and dysfunction. They often feel things at maximum volume. Love feels euphoric. Rejection feels catastrophic. And even small signs of withdrawal, like a change in tone or late text, can trigger panic and or anger. They may desperately cling to their partner one moment, then lash out or withdraw the next, especially if they feel hurt or rejected. And often the relationship becomes their emotional center of gravity, with their sense of worth tied directly to it. To a person diagnosed with BPD, breakups can feel unbearable and lead to repeated attempts to reestablish contact, even if it causes conflict. Their partner may feel as if they're walking on eggshells, not sure what will spark another intense reaction, and they're subjected to a cycle of idealization and devaluation, where one day they're the most amazing person in the world, and the next they are the biggest piece of shit to ever exist in the universe. Now, this push-pull dynamic is common in BPD. Intense emotions and black and white thinking, often swinging between idolizing and vilifying a partner. Because constant reassurance is required to keep the peace, the partner of a BPD individual can become emotionally exhausted over time, and since pulling away or enforcing boundaries can and will provoke strong emotional or dramatic responses in their BPD partner, it's very difficult to maintain these limits, these boundaries. Ryan Poston seemed to be careful about how and when he addressed issues with Shaina, because he knew her reactions could escalate quickly. And even after ending the relationship, he found it difficult to enforce this distance. She would remain in his home, show up uninvited, find ways to insert herself into his daily life. For Shaina, it seemed she oscillated between wanting to win Ryan back at all costs and feeling furious with him for making her feel unwanted. People with BPD do experience emotions more intensely and have difficulty self-soothing, and this can lead to impulsive actions in order to relieve that emotional storm, such as over-explaining to regain control, like you would if you were sending paragraphs of texts, or taking dramatic steps to force a resolution. In the hours before Ryan's death, Shaina's emotional state may have been so heightened that logic and long-term consequences were drowned out by this immediate emotional need to do something, to feel better. And when Ryan's rejection became undeniable, especially with the threat of another woman entering the picture, the abandonment panic likely peaked. In that state, the brain can interpret emotional pain as intolerable, immediate, and only stoppable through extreme action. For someone with BPD, this can sometimes result in impulsive, irreversible decisions meant to end the unbearable feelings of loss, rejection, and humiliation. Now, with all of that being said, I feel compelled to point out what I think is the obvious, but people will still get mad at me. BPD alone does not explain Shaina's behavior or Shaina's escalation to murder. A lot of people live with BPD and never commit violence. So in Shaina's case, there had to have been something else contributing to this incomprehensible escalation. Remember, during the first trial, Dr. Ed Connor testified that Shaina had narcissistic traits, and these traits bring with them a heightened sense of entitlement, along with the belief that this person, Shaina's needs and desires, should always come first, with a little sprinkling of extra sensitivity when it comes to what they perceive as humiliation. So in Shaina's case, the idea of Ryan choosing someone else may have been felt as both abandonment, a BPD trigger, and deep personal humiliation, which would be a narcissistic injury. For someone with narcissistic traits or tendencies, their self-worth is often fragile and depends heavily on external validation, praise, admiration, being desired, being seen as special. For most people, things like rejection, criticism, losing control in a situation or a relationship, or being replaced by someone else can feel hurtful and disappointing and hard to get over. But for a person with narcissistic tendencies, it feels more like a deep wound to their identity, where BPD alone might trigger desperate clinging or even self-harm. The added narcissistic traits can tilt that desperation outward into punishing the perceived offender. So this combination can make someone more likely to externalize blame, as in his obsession with guns is what got him killed, and retaliate. So externalize, I have no blame in this. This person has the audacity to do this to me. I'm going to punish them. They need to be punished. And like I said, we did see that with Shaina. We saw it when she said that Ryan's obsession with guns led to his death. We saw it when she tried to rationalize her decision to kill him by talking about how much he hurt her when he led her on, which was her basically saying that if Ryan hadn't continued caving into her manipulation and pressure, he would still be alive, right? Because that's the only reason he led her on. Ryan Poston would have been done with Shaina Hubers long before she killed him if she had allowed him to be. Additionally, as we have talked about, it appears that Shaina grew up in an environment where she was coddled and spoiled. It doesn't appear that boundaries were ever enforced throughout her upbringing. She didn't hear the word no often, and consequences for bad behavior or poor choices were rare. Her own defense psychologist said, listen, Shaina got in trouble for things, underage drinking, shoplifting. How much do you want to bet that there was no repercussions for that at home? That, in fact, Shaina and her mother found a way to blame other people for why Shaina was drinking underage, right? It was peer pressure. It was those bad kids that she hangs out with. She's just hanging out with the wrong people. They forced her to drink underage. And the shoplifting, I'm sure it was somebody else's fault too. Maybe Shaina was with a friend, and it's that friend's influence that made you shoplift. You are not responsible for anything bad that you do because you're such a sweet girl with a heart of gold and a loving spirit, and you would never do something like this unprovoked or unprompted. You would never do these things without your hand being forced. Because of this, Shaina may have learned that persistence or escalation can override rejection. And if she wasn't held responsible for harmful behavior earlier in life, she may not have developed a realistic sense of limits in relationships or empathy for how her actions affect others. And therein lies the toxic formula for Shaina's abrupt escalation to murder. BPD provided the emotional volatility and intense fear of abandonment. Narcissistic traits added entitlement and a willingness to harm Ryan rather than accept loss. And the way she was raised possibly reinforced the belief that boundaries don't apply to her. And rejection is unacceptable. The night of the murders, these elements seem to have converged, and Ryan's plan to meet another woman was very likely the ultimate trigger, igniting both abandonment panic and narcissistic rage. Ryan Poston's murder wasn't the result of a single mental health diagnosis, but rather a perfect storm of dangerous traits and unchecked entitlement. Shaina's borderline personality traits made her terrified of abandonment, clinging harder the more Ryan tried to pull away. Her narcissistic tendencies meant that his rejection didn't just hurt, it humiliated her, striking at the core of how she saw herself. That humiliation, it's a classic narcissistic injury, that sparked the narcissistic rage, which is a drive to not only fight back, but to punish the person who caused the wound. For Shaina that night, it appears she wasn't just reacting to heartbreak, she was reclaiming control in the most extreme, irreversible way possible. And because she had never been held accountable for her behavior before, there was nothing to stop her once she decided Ryan wasn't going to leave her, not this time. Again, this is clearly shown when Shaina was talking to the police and even entertaining the possibility that she could commit murder in cold blood and not face drastic consequences. She was thinking about how she would live her life afterwards and how her terrible and senseless act of killing Ryan would negatively affect her as she moved forward in that life. She was even concerned with how it was possible no one else would want her after they discovered she had killed her boyfriend. While Shaina was never found legally insane, parts of her behavior suggest she wasn't operating purely in reality. at least not the same reality that the rest of us inhabit. Delusions aren't always full-blown hallucinations or fixed false beliefs about wild scenarios. They can often be more subtle, particularly when they're aligned with how a person sees themselves in the world. In Shaina's mind, if Ryan rejected her, it had to be because he was flawed, or because he didn't understand what was best for him. He didn't see what a good partner she was. In these types of people, like Shaina, rejection isn't accepted as reality. Perceived humiliation must be reversed or avenged, and the narrative has to be self-protective at any cost, meaning Shaina's version of events, both in her own mind and what she told others, needed to be shaped in a way that kept her from feeling or looking like the bad guy or the loser in the situation. And I will be honest with you, I believe that with proper mental health help, therapy, a psychiatrist, learning coping mechanisms, learning more about herself, I think that Shaina could be rehabilitated, as in, I don't think she would ever do this again. But I could be giving her the benefit of the doubt because I can't imagine how anybody could do this to begin with, even once. So I don't think she would ever do it again to anyone else. But I would hope that nobody would get close enough to her to give her the opportunity to do that. I think that rehabilitation in the case of Shaina Hubers really isn't something that I would be in favor of because of what she did. This wasn't an accident. You weren't defending yourself. You killed this young man in cold blood. You knew what you were doing, and you did it because it made you feel better and because it righted some wrong in your mind. There's never a good reason to murder someone in cold blood, but there was just literally no reason other than her own wounding, her own internal messed upness and all the things that were going on. So could she be rehabilitated? It's possible. Could she get close to somebody and do this to them again? It's also possible. She just doesn't seem to have any self-awareness. At least at this point, she hasn't reached a place where she can look at what she did and say, yeah, that was messed up. I got to do better. I can get better. I want to, for myself, for the family that continues supporting me, for Ryan, whose life I took away, and I can prove that, I can get better and that I can feel genuinely sorry about this and hopefully one day face his family and give them a genuine apology. There doesn't seem to be any of that. So without that self-awareness, without that desire to look inside and fix what's broken, I don't think that she can be rehabilitated. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. Do you think she could be rehabilitated? Do you think she deserves the chance to try and be rehabilitated and go back into society and live her life after taking Ryan's for no other reason than he didn't want to be with her anymore? And although we cannot save Ryan Poston, we can give some advice to those like him. We can identify some red flags that might illustrate how someone in your life is not a safe person to be around. First of all, no one is entitled to be with you. Once again, this should go without saying. This should be obvious, but there's a lot of people who are people pleasers. They feel bad, and they sort of let people get away with more than they should be letting them get away with. No one is entitled to be with you. No one is entitled to get anything from you that you're not willing to give. And no one is entitled to ignore boundaries that you have clearly and firmly set. If someone refuses to take no for an answer, ignores your request for space, or continues contacting you after being told to stop, that's not persistence. I don't care what the romance movies tell you. That is not persistence. That's coercion. This is a clear sign that this person doesn't actually care about you or what you want. They care about what they want, and they're going to try to use you as an instrument to get what they want. Another red flag, stalking. And when I say stalking, most people think of someone lurking in the shadows and following their victim physically. However, stalking can take many less obvious forms that are just as invasive and dangerous. If someone's going through your phone, reading your messages, logging into or out of your social media without permission, if they're monitoring where you go through GPS or neighbors or mutual friends, if they're showing up at your home or workplace uninvited, even if that person shows up with your favorite coffee or a bouquet of flowers, if you asked them to not do it or to stop doing it, it's stalking. It's harassment. Sending relentless texts, calls, emails, when they've been asked to stop, that's harassment. I don't care if the texts profess all the love and devotion in the world. I don't care if this person is telling you you're the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. and they want to be better for you, and they've realized that, it's all their fault. I don't care if they're telling you everything you've been hoping to hear for months or days or weeks or years. If you've asked them to stop, it's harassment. Also, watch out for drama that never seems to end. The constant cycle of breaking up, making up, escalating arguments that are designed to drain your energy and leave you feeling confused, unfocused, unsteady. Of course, healthy relationships have conflict. All relationships have conflict. But in healthy relationships, that conflict resolves. And then the people in the relationship learn from it and learn more about each other. So if every week is a knock down, drag out, all or nothing fight, this is not passion. Once again, I don't care what the romance movies tell you. Not passion, it's dysfunction. Also, these weird threats or dark jokes that Shaina was spreading all around town, telling her friends that she was going to shoot Ryan at the range or disfigure him in some way. Sometimes people will excuse this kind of stuff as emotional venting. But I believe statements like this are to be taken very seriously, right? When it's like actually threatening your life. And some of these things have been said to me before. So I remember like struggling with what those things meant and how they felt after. So my favorite is, oh, you'll be dead before I let you leave me, or I'll put you in the ground before I live without you, kind of thing. And this person will say it like smiling and joking, like, I love you so much, I'm never going to let you get away. But it's not a joke. It's not a joke. I know for a fact that some people consider these kinds of statements to be like romantic or something. Oh my goodness, he loves me so much. He never wants to be without me. Look how intense he is. No, not romantic, scary. Listen to your gut. Don't minimize other people's toxic or scary behavior for the sake of people pleasing, for the sake of not rocking the boat, for the sake of being nice. Ryan told his friends that Shaina was the craziest person he had ever met and admitted that she almost scared him at times. That was his instinct talking to him, screaming at him, and it was a survival sign, but Ryan didn't want to hurt Shaina's feelings. And why did he not want to hurt her feelings? Because, yeah, Shaina acted crazy sometimes. But a lot of the times she was great, right? She was cooking for him and doing his laundry and being there for him and, talking to him and being a good girlfriend. So that when the things happened where she was acting crazy, Ryan would blame himself as in, well, I'm pulling away and I feel bad. She's a great girl, but I don't want to be with her. Like, I just don't feel right about this. So he's thinking to himself, it's not her fault that she's like this. She's a great partner and I'm just not compatible with her. And maybe I do bring these like crazy spells out in her because I'm not 100% sure about what I want. And I kind of didn't want anything committed. And maybe I like made her think I did. So this is my fault. I've already hurt her enough. I don't want to just say, hey, screw you, lady, get out of my life, right? He still cared about her in a way, at least as a person, as a human being. We know that Ryan had a big heart for human beings. He didn't want to hurt Shaina's feelings. And I'm sure he also talked himself out of his fear, which he may have felt was irrational. Like, oh, I'm this big 6'2" guy. She's this little girl. What could she possibly do to me? It's an annoyance at the worst, and hopefully as time goes on, I'll find someone, she'll find someone, she'll back off. He was probably like almost chastising himself for feeling so uneasy about Shaina. But being nice is not worth your safety. And a firm, unapologetic boundary is not cruel, no matter what anybody tries to tell you. It is self-preservation. Don't let anyone make you question your gut or allow them to make you second guess any boundary that you felt it was necessary to establish, because you felt it was necessary to establish that boundary for a reason, trust me. At the end of the day, what's most terrifying about this case is that it reminds us we can never truly know what's brewing beneath the surface of another person. Shaina Hubers looked like she had it all: college educated, attractive, driven, a good choice for a partner, until the cracks started to show. Someone can present as smart, put together, talented, and charming while hiding a dangerous cocktail of mental illnesses, personality disorders, and toxic character traits. From the outside, they might look completely normal, even enviable. But internally, instability and rage can be quietly simmering, waiting for the right combination of rejection, humiliation, and loss of control to ignite them. And when that moment comes, the explosion can be so sudden, so violent, then no one sees it coming. Not even the person standing right in front of them, the person who shares a life with them, shares a bed with them, shares the most intimate moments and experiences available to mankind with them. Sometimes you just don't know with some people. Ryan Poston had so much promise, a brilliant mind, a sharp wit, a future filled with possibilities. He was building a career, deepening his relationships, and by all accounts was only just beginning to carve out the life he wanted. But now all of that is gone, not because of an accident or fate, but because someone else decided that their ego, their rage, their need for control mattered more than his right to live. And that's the real moral of this story, that one person's unchecked instability can erase an entire future in an instant, leaving a family without their son, a community without a friend, and the world without the man that Ryan Poston could have become. That's all I have for you. I cannot wait to hear what you think about this after the conclusion, after the third part, in the comment section. Thank you so much for bearing with me and being patient, even though I didn't intentionally try to lie to you about this being 2 parts. That's what ended up happening, and I'm taking accountability because I'm not Shaina Hubers. I didn't mean to lie, but it ended up being 3 parts, and I appreciate you sticking through it with me, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to say and what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, share it if you think it's worth sharing, subscribe if you haven't already. Remember, Halloween's coming up. It's coming up in October. I've already written 1 script and it's so good. I might go live and talk with you guys about it because I'm so excited about this actual sort of like, I guess, direction I'm taking with this year's Halloween. It's going to be a little different, so I'm excited. And I want to talk to you guys about it. So anyways, keep an eye out on my community page for that. If I decide to do that, I will let you all know. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe. I love you so much, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.
Don't break now. And the bottle's going straight down.